Hey, Kurt Papke coming to you from the Chiricahua Wilderness. Today we're going to take a trek along the Crest Trail through the Chiricahuas, which follows sort of the ridgeline of the peaks of the Chiricahua Mountains that allows you to hike at high elevations for a long period of time without losing too much in elevation or having to gain too much in elevation. This is a great trail during the summer, best done maybe in June when the monsoon storms aren't quite so prevalent. I'm doing it in late July where the storms are a little bit more likely, but right now the weather forecast calls for sunny skies and just a 20% chance of rain, so I shouldn't get too wet. But this is a great summertime hike because it's so much cooler at the high elevations. Temperatures are in the 70s as opposed to the hundreds in downtown Tucson.
I can see the sun shining, oh yes, lighting up a path to tread.
Our trailhead for this hike is Rustler Park. It's an easy 3-hour drive from where I live in Oro Valley. But if you live on the south or east side of Tucson, it'll cut about a half an hour off your drive time. The last 15 miles of the drive can take an hour due to the gravel forest road, which has a lot of hairpin switchbacks, particularly the last 7 miles or so. The road is maintained reasonably well and should be doable in most passenger cars that have decent ground clearance. I wouldn't recommend that you bring a trailer like this fellow did. He bottomed out his trailer several times while I was following him. I suggest you resist the temptation of taking Forest Road 42D from Rustler Park to the Long Park Trailhead, unless you have a very high clearance 4-wheel drive vehicle. It is not maintained and has some really rough spots. The Chiricahua Mountains are the second highest of Arizona's Sky Islands. They get their name from the intense biodiversity of their high elevations, and the wildlife has difficulty traversing the desert floor to move from one island mountain range to another. Rustler Park has extensive campgrounds if you want to car camp the night before your hike, but it's not terribly scenic due to the total burn of the ponderosa pines that once graced the area. Even the trailed signposts still show signs of the burn. I'll have more to say about that fire in a few minutes. My campsite and turnaround point on this hike was Junction Saddle, so called due to all the trails that converge in that area. It's a popular campsite, and I often see groups spending the night there as it's close to the springs where you can get water.
Well, look at that. My first patch of raspberries. Not very far into the hike. Only a couple in there. That kind of explains the bear scat I saw a little ways back. This entire hillside is covered with raspberry plants. Pretty amazing. Kind of intermingled with ferns due to the high precipitation up here. Not a lot of ripe looking berries on there, but to maybe gather a couple raspberries. It's not too far from where I've seen or I've had bear encounters in the past, which is not surprising. Where you have bear food, you will have bears. Here we go. Not a lot, but it's a mouthful anyway. So let's see what they taste like. Well, most of them made it into my mouth. A little on the seedy side, which is to be expected. We had really good winter rains this year, which I think caused the raspberry plants to do extremely well in the spring. So the plants have grown extremely well, set a lot of fruit, but we've had a very dry summer. The monsoons really haven't started in earnest yet. So I don't think the plants have enough water available to make really big juicy berries. So there's berries on the plants, but they're pretty small and seedy. Still, pretty tasty snack, I gotta say.
Soon after, the vistas start to open up, providing great views of adjacent mountain ranges and the valley floor. The Chiricahuas are known for their butterflies, and I wasn't disappointed on this hike.
I'm not sure what these purple plants are. Whatever they are, Butterflies sure seem to like them. And so do some of these other bugs I see crawling around on them. It's must taste dang good. Everybody likes it.
The Horseshoe 2 fire happened in 2011 and burned about 350 square miles, most of the mountain range. As we'll see, some groves of old-growth ponderosa pines were spared, but evidence of the damage is apparent 8 years later.
So we're going through one of the many areas of regrowth here. These are poplars, and they most likely sprouted up right after the fire occurred. And now the forest is regenerating itself, and the poplars are growing up and will eventually become the understory trees of future ponderosa pines. So in a few seconds here, we're going to be leaving the poplar grove and then emerging into a heavy burn area. And you can see out in front here all the trunks of the burned ponderosa pines from the Horseshoe fire. And it's quite a sight to see all these dead trees in through here. It's a beautiful morning along the Crest Trail. The view down into the valley below. Beautiful sights along the beautiful sight lines along the Crest Trail. There's very few spots that are not scenic in some way, which makes this such a great hike. So one of the things I love about this hike in this area are the transitions. So right now I'm hiking out of a dense poplar area and out into this beautiful open park with all the wildflowers and burnt trees, of course. But I just love these transitions where you go from one area that's completely different to the next. So we have, I believe that's Fly Peak, could be wrong, but you can see that's half forested. But I'm in this open area now, completely open meadow. It's just got wildflowers, birds flitting around, and quite a change from the ponderosa pine forest I've just been walking through. So here we go. This is Round Park. And there's a trail that splits off here. That must go up to the peak, perhaps. Which would be a nice hike sometime. I'll have to make that. Now we're coming up on some smaller pines, probably sprouted right after the fire. They're only about as tall as I am, so maybe 6-7 feet tall, fairly young.
One of the things you learn quickly backpacking in Arizona is you plan your hikes around water availability. The good news is the Chiricahuas have some reliable springs.
Well, it's still here. Anita Spring. It's a welcome respite up here in the Chiricahua wilderness. There's a couple springs up here, and this is one of the more dependable ones. It used to be one of the easier ones to find, and now it's one of the more difficult ones to find. It's in the past 4 years since I've been coming here, it's really gotten overgrown, and without a GPS track, it would be really tough to find. There's a couple cairns, there's a couple spots where the trail is visible, but for the most part, you're bushwhacking. So I'll provide the GPS coordinates for it so you can find it, but trust me, you better know what you're getting in for with the hike in here, because it's not a cakewalk. And if you're depending on this for water, you better make sure you can be in here. So that's my caveat emptor. So Anita Spring. So there's the spring and my shadow. And just to reinforce what I was saying, here's the surrounding woods. That's actually the trail right there. It actually is distinct here. This is about as clear as it gets, and it's only about 100 feet or so, and then it completely disappears. And then you have all of these dead ponderosa pines from the horseshoe fire that give you no landmarks whatsoever. They all look identical. This section of the trail really shows the interesting inclines that the Crest Trail follows along. It's, I don't know, maybe a 40-degree slope here, and you really don't want to slide down and start log rolling down the hill, but pretty rare for something like that to occur. It's really pretty safe, but it looks kind of intimidating with this incline, especially in these open areas where you can see it's visible to you. When you're in the tree cover, you don't see it as much, you don't notice it as much, so it's not quite so unnerving. But so this is pretty typical of the trail surface. Kind of loose, small rock, larger rocks. Very typical along the Crest Trail. Since it follows the slope, there's a fair amount of erosion from precipitation that washes away the soil, leaving only the rocks behind. So this is a very open area. The tree trunks from the ponderosas from the fire must have washed down the hillside.
The forest roads are pretty dusty, and you'll definitely have to wash your vehicle after making this trip. Thanks for watching. Please click on like or subscribe below. So long.